Get empowered. Inspiring, motivating, empowering. This is the Bev Smith Show. Get empowered.
We're talking to Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer here in the studio. We're just constantly talking. This is not the last time he's going to come on our show. You can trust me. We met a new friend, someone who gives us all the information. Get a pen and pencil before he says goodbye. We're going to have him give you the website and his book. We're going to talk to his agent to get a copy of the book because we booked him today, and we're so thrilled he was available. Before we talk about what Americans should do before they go to the polls, let me step back for just a moment.
Sure.
We were talking about this during the break. You said the cost of one airplane, one jet, one fighter bomber, whatever, that we're not even using could have supplied our military with the proper weapons. Okay, if I'm a mother and I am now wiping the spittle away from my child because a bomb went on him because he didn't have the proper headgear. And you know I'm not making these examples up. This is what has happened.
No, you're not. You're correct.
You know,
correct.
This is what has happened. If I'm that mother, I'm going to tell you something. I went to Walter Reed Hospital. When I worked in Washington, D.C., a lot of us donated our time there. And because I was a talk show host at NBC, I wanted to know what was going on. We didn't even take care of our soldiers. As a talk show host here, I must tell you that I got telephone calls from women in Virginia whose husbands were being deployed to Afghanistan who said that the money hadn't come through and they didn't have beds for their children to sleep on in Virginia. You know about that. So we raised money on the Bev Smith Show. There's something immoral about this. There's something immoral about these people who keep talking about war. Why can't we ask for an investigation of them? And would that help us make decisions in November?
Well, I think obviously there's to answer your last part of your question first, we have actually been trying to put together a commission to look at this sort of thing, and you might be surprised, Bev, probably not. No one wants to do it. We've actually proposed this on Capitol Hill that we actually do a commission, bipartisan, both sides. You know, I'm trying to work with Ralph Nader, for goodness sake, and Bruce Fine, who's on the right, to try to establish something with members of Congress, and no one has the will to do it. And so these issues you bring up, which are valid, I had to go up to Walter Reed recently to visit a Marine who was injured. And Bev, within the first 10 minutes of being there, I saw 6 kids who had dual amputees of their legs. I mean, it's just insane to think that we have not done more to support that, and we could have. I flew in recently to one of the military airports where they have these large, glistening, nicely, very expensive fighter jets sitting there doing nothing. And we have made very poor decisions regarding our investment of defense, and this is why we have to have smarter people who are willing to do the right thing, to be loyal to their oath of office, rather than essentially make decisions which will benefit either folks down the road or themselves regarding
So what do we do about the politicians? Because I go back to that point you made about chess and checkers. What do we do? Because here's this politician, okay? And he sees that in his district there's Boeing jobs. Right. That may be the only industry for jobs. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Okay, here's this. There's a company over there with Blackwater, who we could talk about that for days, and the money that was spent. And then there's another company over here that is billing the American taxpayer $300 for the purchase of a hammer. What do we do?
Right. Again, you got to go back to the people who were responsible for setting the laws and setting, frankly, the investigations. It's Congress. The Department of Defense will never do an adequate job of investigating itself. And as a matter of fact, I've testified to this fact. If you bring in investigators like the Inspector General, who's supposed to be the watchdog, my goodness, Bev, I don't know if you know this. Most IGs work for the chief of the investigation of the individual who runs that organization. So you're not going to have an investigator actually investigating his own boss if the wrongdoing goes to him. The Congress needs to separate out these IGs, make them independent, so they can actually get to the bottom of things. Frankly, Congress does not necessarily want to get to the bottom of things, because if they learn the truth, they have to act on it. So there's always this kabuki dance of, gee, yeah, we want to hear about what's going on, but nothing that really is going to make us have to make hard decisions. Look, it's their job to make hard decisions. Each member of our of our nation has a responsibility to hold Congress responsible for the decisions they make that have global implications. Again, we have troops fighting forward right now. We owe it to them to protect them as best we can, to bring them home as quickly as we can, and Congress needs to do a better job of demanding accountability for the decisions made to arm them, to foster them, to take care of their families. And when they don't do a good job, someone needs to be fired and bring someone else in who can do it. And we did that during World War II. We fired generals all the time during World War II if they couldn't perform. For some reason, Bev, we don't do that now. And yet we have more generals than ever. We have more generals on the roll than we had during World War II, and yet we have literally 1/4 of the force serving. So you got to ask yourself, why do we have all these chiefs, not enough, and Indians not being treated properly? So it's all out of whack. It all, to me, goes back to Congress demanding our congressmen and women be loyal to their oath of office, make the hard decisions, call for investigations when necessary, and do those things as we go forward as a nation.
Well, what bothers me is how we leave our country. Because one of the things that frightens me is the fact that we've used our National Guard the way we have. And I mean, to me, and again, I'm talking about my military background, and so I've had Navy, Army, Marines, and Air Force in my family. But these men and women who volunteer their time for the National Guard, they did not, nor did their family members, think that they would have to leave the shores of America. They were here for the purpose of protecting us. Now, I want to know how protected we are, because we have major problems, because we talk about this thing called terrorism. The other day, in a quiet community here in my hometown, a young man heard gunshots. The young man was a perfect student, young African-American boy with a future like you wouldn't even believe, Anthony. He opened the door, and the terrorist shot and just sprayed, and he was killed instantly in front of his mother, his parents, everything. This is happening all over America. When do we take the strategies of the military and come in, and I'm not talking about militarizing American cities, but certainly that's a terroristic threat. We know a young man, a college student, that was a student of Brooks a teacher, my executive producer, that when was it, yesterday? He was 2 days ago. He is walking on the streets here in our neighborhood. Somebody walks up to him and puts a gun in his face. We need to know that we have a presence here that can stop that. We need to use some of the tools of the military. So would a draft help?
You know, I like your point about National Guard. I actually started out my career in the Ohio Army National Guard, and I'm a big fan of the Guard because, as you point out, it's their job to defend that state. They are a state resource, and their job is to essentially support the people of that state. And I think we have underused them for domestic issues, helping bring safety and security to our people. At the same time, they've been worn out. A lot of the National Guard units that we have today, as a matter of fact, the unit I actually started in, the 371st Support Group, actually deployed to Afghanistan a couple years ago. So all these Guard units have been, like all the other military, worn out by the war of the past 10 years. What I think we need to do is, again, figure out what the real issues are. And this goes back to essentially doing a bottom-up review, basically saying the Defense Act, the National Security Act of 47 was great, but that was 1947. And then try to understand what we need to do both for domestic issues and for international issues. And essentially then, once we identify what the threats are, what we require military force to do for us, then we actually build the force around those requirements. What an idea. You don't build something without understanding the blueprint, the architecture of what's necessary.